This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Germany's election earlier this year came as somewhat of a relief to European centrists. While the AfD performed relatively well, Freidrich Merz's CDU still came out on top by a healthy margin, and were able to form a two-party grand coalition with the SPD. However, only 2 months on, and Merz is already mired in crisis. His recently announced coalition deal with the SPD has disappointed the more conservative wing of the CDU, and the polls now suggest that the AfD is, for the first time ever, the most popular party in Germany. So in this video, we're going to have a look at why the AfD have surged in the polls, and what it might mean for German politics. Never miss a major news story by listening to the Daily Briefing, TLDR's daily rundown of everything you need to know. Listen along in your favourite podcast app or by clicking the link in the description. So let's just start with a quick recap. As you probably already know, the AfD has experienced a steady increase in popularity over the last couple of years. At the 2021 election, for instance, they won just 10% of the vote, coming in 5th place behind the SPD, CDU, Greens and the FDP. But by January 2024, they were polling at around 25%, behind only the CDU. However, from here, their numbers essentially stagnated. After a series of scandals in early 2024, the AfD fell back down to about 20%, and ended up winning 20.8% of the vote at the 2025 election. This was still the AfD's best result in a nationwide German election by some distance, and double what they achieved in 2021, but 8 points behind Freidrich Merz's CDU, who were then able to form a grand coalition with the SPD. However, the latest polling suggests that, in the 2 months since, the AfD have seen yet another surge. Both the CDU and AfD have now converged around 25%, and some polls suggest the AfD even has a slight edge. An Ipsos poll from earlier this month, for instance, found the AfD with a 1-point lead, at 25% to the CDU's 24%, while a Forza poll released last week put the AfD at an all-time high of 26%, again 1 point ahead of the CDU. More in-depth polling suggests that most of this movement has been driven by a migration of voters from the CDU to the AfD, with Ipsos polling from late March finding that roughly 10% of Germans who voted for the CDU at the last election are now saying they would vote for the AfD. This has all been accompanied by a decline in Merz's own approval ratings. The most recent ARD Deutschland Trend poll, for instance, found that just 25% of Germans approved of him, down 10 points in a month. So, why are Merz and the CDU hemorrhaging voters to the AfD before they've even taken office? Well, it seems to be essentially because more right-wing CDU voters think Merz, who presented himself as a conservative correction to the CDU's Merkel-era centrism, has U-turned on his more right-wing campaign pledges and moved too far to the left on certain issues. The most obvious issue here is debt. Only 2 days before the election, Merz gave an interview with Politico where he warned that Europe's addiction to debt was bringing it to the brink of another financial crisis, and mocked the, quote, fantasy of all social democrats that more debt was the solution to all Germany's ills. While he didn't rule out some sort of reform to Germany's debt brake, which essentially required balancing budgets, in that interview he argued that structural reforms to Germany's immigration and welfare policies would have to come first. However, almost immediately after the election, Merz announced that he would be reforming the debt brake to fund a dramatic increase in public investment and defence spending, which he then rushed through the Bundestag before the newly elected MPs had taken their seats. Merz justified this apparent U-turn by arguing that Trump's adversarial approach to Europe, as evidenced by the argument between Zelensky, Trump and Vance in the Oval Office, constituted a crisis that required immediate and dramatic action. But while Merz's pivot was widely praised in the international press, it didn't go down well in Germany. According to polling, 68% of Germans, including 34% of CDU voters and 93% of AfD voters, just didn't buy Merz's justification. This also triggered some infighting within the CDU, and earlier this month the party's General Secretary Carsten Linnemann actually declined Merz's offer of economy minister, implying he couldn't support the coalition's new economic programme. Something similar is true when it comes to immigration, which remains German voters' most important issue. During the campaign, Merz proposed some remarkably hardline measures, including stricter deportation measures, blanket rejections of asylum seekers at the German border, and permanent border controls. These last two measures would undermine the EU Schengen Agreement, which is supposed to guarantee free movement of people between member states. But Merz doubled down and criticised the EU's migration policy as, quote, visibly dysfunctional. However, during negotiations, Merz apparently watered down these pledges. The new coalition agreement only talks about temporary border controls and about turning back asylum seekers in coordination with neighbouring countries, which seems unlikely given that Germany's neighbours clearly don't want more asylum seekers. Again, this has sparked some upset within the CDU. In an open letter to Merz penned earlier this month, members of the CDU's youth branch in Cologne accused Merz of submitting to the left-wing mainstream. Finally, something similar is true when it comes to climate policies. Again, during the campaign, Merz attacked the previous government's climate policies and promised to, quote, put the economy before the climate. However, the new coalition agreement basically signals continuity with the previous government. The European and national headline climate targets have been kept in place, including the overarching goal of climate neutrality by 2045, and the climate portfolio has been moved back to the Environment Ministry, which will be run by the SPD. That the SPD has been able to push Merz to the left here should be unsurprising. With the debt brake reforms and increases in public investment, Merz has already given the SPD much of what it wanted, and they know he has no other viable coalition partner. Merz also needed support from the Greens to get his debt brake reforms through the Bundestag, who insisted on another 100 billion euros for the Climate and Transition Fund. So you get the idea. So far, Merz has disappointed some of the CDU's more conservative voters, who've instead flocked to the AfD. So what does this actually mean for German politics? Well, while there's no federal election due anytime soon, the AfD's surge will still put yet more pressure on the so-called firewall, which is supposed to prevent other parties from cooperating with the far right. This is already happening. CDU heavyweight Jens Spahn told the German press that the AfD should be treated in parliamentary procedures and processes like any other opposition party. So it's hard to see this firewall surviving the next few years if current trends continue. At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you learn more about the world around you. Luckily for us, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, shares this same commitment. Their thousands of interactive lessons in maths, science, programming, data analysis, and AI are designed to help you learn by actually doing, rather than asking you to mindlessly memorize stuff. For instance, each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. This helps you build your critical thinking skills and ultimately become a better thinker. Brilliant's newly updated maths courses help you establish a strong foundation in algebra, then helps you build on this, teaching you how to conquer calculus, all while maintaining an emphasis on problem solving and reasoning. The thing I like best about this, though, is that their mathematical courses help you develop your mathematical intuition and fluency, skills that you can use in the real world. As we've told you before, data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen. Or you can click on the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.